Let me start with a question. Have you ever met a man who had 100 excuses and not a single result? He'll tell you it was the economy, it was the government, it was his boss, it was the weather, it was his parents, it was the traffic, it was always something. But let me tell you, a real man, he doesn't waste time on excuses. A real man takes responsibility. Now, I want you to think about this responsibility is not a burden, it's power. The moment you say, it's my fault, it's my life, it's my job to fix it, at that moment you've taken the steering wheel of your life back into your hands. Because here's the truth, if you keep giving away responsibility, you're giving away control. And when you give away control, you end up living by other people's decisions instead of your own. You see, life has seasons. Winter comes, summer comes, fall comes, spring comes. And you can't change the seasons, but you can change yourself. You can prepare for winter. You can plant in the spring. You can reap in the fall. That's responsibility. Real men don't curse the season. They prepare for it. They don't complain about the wind. They adjust the sails. And let me tell you, excuses are the language of failure. Every failure I've ever met had a long list of excuses. And every success I've ever met had one line, I am responsible. That's it. That's the difference. When a man blames, he stays the same. But when a man accepts, he transforms. You know, sometimes when people hear the word responsibility, they frown. They think, oh no, that sounds heavy. That sounds like pressure. That sounds like work. But let me tell you something. Responsibility is not a burden. It's the greatest source of power you will ever have. See, when you say, I am responsible, what you're really saying is, I'm in charge. I'm in control. I hold the pen that writes the story of my life. And that's not pressure, that's privilege. Think about it for a moment. The opposite of responsibility is blame. And what does blame do? Blame takes the pen out of your hands and puts it in somebody else's. Blame says, my life is the way it is because of them. My future is in their hands, not mine. That's weakness. That's surrender. That's giving up your power. Responsibility is the exact opposite. It's the decision to grab the steering wheel and say, if it's going to change, it's up to me. Now, some folks are masters at excuses. They've got a long list: the government, the weather, the boss, the company, the family, the traffic. If you listen long enough, they'll run out of people to blame and start blaming the planets, the stars, even bad luck. But here's the truth. While they're busy pointing fingers, nothing changes. Their income doesn't change. Their relationships don't change. Their health doesn't change. Why? Because they handed away the power that could have changed everything. But here's the good news. The moment you stop blaming, the moment you stop excusing, the moment you stand up and say, it's me. I've got to fix it. I've got to learn. I've got to grow. That's the moment you become powerful, because now you're in control. Now you can change your habits, change your thinking, change your direction. And when you change, everything else changes. Let me give you an example. Imagine two men who both lose their job on the same day. One man says, well, this is just my luck. The economy's bad. Nobody's hiring. There's nothing I can do. And so he waits, he complains, he blames. 6 months later, he's still in the same place, maybe even worse. Now, the other man says, losing my job was tough, but maybe I should have prepared better. Maybe I need to upgrade my skills. Maybe I need to be more valuable in the marketplace. This is on me. And because he takes responsibility, he acts. He learns, he grows, he applies. 6 months later, he's not just employed, he's stronger than before. Same problem, different response. What made the difference? Responsibility. Responsibility is power because it gives you options. You can't control everything around you. You can't control the weather. You can't control the seasons. You can't control what happens to you. But you can control how you prepare, how you react, how you respond. And that's the secret. When you take responsibility, you no longer wait for life to happen. You make life happen. Now, I'll be honest with you. Responsibility isn't always comfortable. It's not always fun to look in the mirror and admit, I could have done better. I should have tried harder. I made the wrong choice. That stings. But let me tell you what hurts more. Living a life where you never admit it, where you keep running from the truth, where you keep saying, it wasn't me, it was them. That's the kind of life that keeps a man weak, keeps him small, keeps him stuck. Responsibility may sting for a moment, but it will set you free for a lifetime. And here's something else to remember. Every time you accept responsibility, you grow. You become wiser. You become stronger. You become more capable. That's how you build a life of substance. That's how you earn respect. People may forget your words. They may forget your achievements. But they will never forget your character. And character is built on responsibility. So when you hear that word, responsibility, don't flinch. Don't think of it as a weight on your shoulders. Think of it as strength in your hands. Think of it as the master key that unlocks the door to freedom, to success, to a future you can be proud of. Because when you finally decide to own your life, every part of it, you stop living as a victim of your circumstances and start living as the author of your destiny. And that, my friends, is real power. Life moves in cycles, just like nature. There are winters, there are summers, there are springs, and there are falls. And just like the farmer, we don't get to decide which season comes next. We don't get to vote on it. We don't get to negotiate with it. Winter doesn't call ahead to ask if it's a convenient time. It just comes. But here's the good news. While you can't change the seasons, you can change yourself. You can prepare. You can get stronger, wiser, better equipped. That's where the real opportunity lies. See, winter will always come. Winter's in the economy. Winter's in relationships. Winter's in your health. Things you didn't plan for. Things that surprise you. Things that feel unfair. But here's the reality, you don't get to change that. Complaining about the cold won't make the snow melt. Blaming the wind won't make it stop blowing. The seasons don't care about your opinion, but they do respect preparation. The man who prepared for winter has wood stacked, food stored, and a coat ready. The man who didn't prepare, he suffers. It's the same with life. When spring arrives, there's a window of time, a season of opportunity. You can plant, you can try, you can begin. But the farmer who oversleeps in the spring, who wastes the planting season, ends up with an empty barn in the fall. And he can't blame the spring for passing him by. It was always going to pass. That's the nature of seasons. They don't wait. They don't pause. They move on schedule, and so must we. Now, summer is different. Summer is when the weeds show up. You plant something good, but weeds always find their way in. You don't have to invite them. They come unannounced. Negativity, distractions, setbacks, they're like weeds. And summer demands that you protect your crops, that you guard what you planted, that you work to keep what you started. A man who neglects his field in the summer wakes up to find it overrun. And here's the lesson. You can't change the fact that weeds exist, but you can change how you handle them. You can pull them, you can fight them, you can protect what matters. Then comes the fall, the harvest, and fall is honest. Fall doesn't lie. Fall simply says, here's the result of what you did in the spring and summer. If you planted little, you reap little. If you planted much, you reap much. If you protected your field, you harvest abundance. If you neglected it, you harvest disappointment. Fall never lies. It gives you back exactly what you gave it. And if you don't like your harvest, there's only one solution. Change yourself before the next spring. That's the beauty of life. The seasons repeat. Winters come again, springs come again, summers and falls come again. But every new cycle gives you the chance to be different, to be better, to approach it wiser. You don't get to change the order of the seasons, but you do get to change the way you live through them. And that's where the real hope is. I'll tell you what happens to a lot of people. They try to fight the seasons. They wish for no winters, no weeds, no difficulty, no disappointment. They want life to be all sunshine and flowers. But wishing won't change it. You don't get to eliminate the tough times. What you get to do is decide how you'll face them. Will you prepare or will you complain? Will you plant or will you procrastinate? Will you protect or will you neglect? Will you learn from the harvest or will you just blame the season? Those are the choices that matter. And here's the real magic. When you decide to change yourself, suddenly the seasons don't scare you anymore. Winter becomes a time of testing. Spring becomes a time of hope. Summer becomes a time of discipline. And fall becomes a time of honesty. You stop fighting the seasons, and you start working with them. You stop dreading them, and you start respecting them. That shift makes all the difference. So remember this, the seasons will always come. They come for the rich and the poor, the strong and the weak, the prepared and the unprepared. They come without prejudice. The only difference is how you meet them, and that difference is entirely up to you. You can't change the seasons, but you can always change yourself. One of the easiest things in the world to find is an excuse. They're everywhere. If you want one, you'll never run out. Some people have a whole library of excuses. Hardbound, leather cover, different editions. They've got excuses for every day of the week and every hour of the day. But here's the truth. Excuses are the language of failure. They sound good, they feel good, they even convince people for a while. But at the end of the day, they don't change anything. They just keep you where you are. See, an excuse is simply a well-dressed lie you tell yourself to feel better about not doing what you should have done. And the more you tell it, the more you believe it. You start to think the excuse is reality. But reality doesn't bend to excuses. If you plant nothing in the spring, no excuse in the world will put a harvest in your barn come fall. The harvest doesn't listen to your story. The harvest just says, you didn't plant. So there's nothing here. That's honesty. Now, here's what's interesting. Excuses have a way of sounding noble. I was just too tired. I was too busy. I didn't have the time. I didn't get the support. On the surface, they make sense. But if you peel them back, they all say the same thing. I didn't take responsibility. That's what it comes down to. And if you live on excuses long enough, they rob you of your future. Let me tell you, I've met men with the most extraordinary excuses. One man told me he couldn't get ahead because his boss didn't like him. Another said he couldn't save money because the economy was bad. Someone else said he couldn't improve his marriage because his wife wasn't supportive. The list goes on. But here's the funny part. For every man with an excuse, I can show you another man who had the same problem, the same challenge, maybe even worse, and he still made it. The difference wasn't the problem. The difference was the response. One man built an excuse. The other man built a result. Excuses are easy because they cost nothing up front. They don't ask for sweat. They don't ask for discipline. They don't ask for sacrifice. You can sit on the couch and make excuses all day long. But here's the price. They cost you everything later. They cost you your confidence. They cost you your reputation. They cost you your dreams. Every excuse you buy today is a debt you'll have to pay tomorrow. And let me give you a little warning. Excuses are contagious. You spend enough time around people who make them, and you'll start making them too. You'll catch the language of failure. They'll convince you that it's normal, that it's acceptable, that it's just how life is. And before you know it, you'll be fluent in excuses and bankrupt in results. So you have to be careful who you listen to. Now, I'm not saying life is easy. Life is tough. There are obstacles. There are setbacks. There are unfair situations. But here's the key: life will hand everyone challenges. Some people use those challenges as reasons to quit, and some people use them as reasons to grow. The same difficulty that becomes one man's excuse becomes another man's fuel. And that choice makes all the difference. I remember a story about a man who grew up in poverty. He had every excuse in the world not to succeed. No money, no education, no connections. But instead of saying, "I can't because I don't have," he said, "I must because I don't have." And that shift in thinking took him places most people only dream about. He had the same reasons to fail as everyone else around him, but he refused to make them excuses. He turned them into motivation. That's the power of refusing to speak the language of failure. So excuses might buy you sympathy, but they'll never buy you success. People may nod and agree with your reasons, but deep down, they know the truth, and so do you. At the end of the day, results are what matter. Did you plant? Did you work? Did you show up? Did you give it your best? If yes, you get the harvest. If no, no excuse in the world will change it. Excuses may sound sweet in the moment, but they leave a bitter taste in the end. They're the stories that keep men small, keep men stuck, keep men living lives far below their potential. And until you give them up, nothing changes. But the day you stop speaking the language of failure, the day you drop the excuses, is the day you step into possibility. Because life doesn't reward excuses, it rewards effort. Discipline is a funny word. Most people hear it and immediately think of restriction, limitation, punishment. They think discipline is about what you can't do, what you have to give up, what you're forced into. But the truth is the opposite. Discipline isn't the enemy of freedom. Discipline is the price you pay to earn it. Without discipline, you live chained to your impulses, chained to regret, chained to whatever life throws at you. With discipline, you get to walk free. Think about it. A man without discipline spends what he earns the moment he earns it. And before long, he's in debt, worried, anxious, working not because he chooses to, but because he has to. But the man who practices discipline, who saves, who invests, who controls his spending, he may sacrifice today, but tomorrow he has freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to breathe, freedom to live without the weight of chains. Same money, same opportunities, different results. The difference is discipline, or take health. The undisciplined man eats whatever he wants, skips exercise, ignores his body. And it feels good in the moment, sure, but down the road he's trapped. Trapped by illness, trapped by medication, trapped by fatigue. Now compare him to the man who disciplines himself. He eats well, he moves his body, he rests properly. In the moment, it's effort. But later, it's freedom. Freedom to move, freedom to live strong, freedom to enjoy life without constant limitation. Again, the difference is discipline. Discipline is the bridge between what you want and what you actually get. Everyone wants freedom, but not everyone is willing to pay the price. And the price is small acts of discipline, repeated day after day, getting up when you said you would, following through on what you promised, saying no when it's easier to say yes, saving when it's easier to spend, working when it's easier to quit. Those little acts add up, and over time, they buy you a kind of freedom most men only dream about. I once knew a man who said, "I just want to live free. I don't like rules. I don't like discipline. I want to do whatever I want." And for a while, he did. He lived without boundaries, without structure, without discipline. But a few years later, he wasn't free at all. He was broke, unhealthy, unhappy, and stuck in habits he couldn't control. He thought discipline was prison, but it turned out his lack of discipline built a bigger prison than he ever imagined. See, freedom is not the absence of discipline. Freedom is the reward of discipline. A man who disciplines himself doesn't have to be controlled by others. He doesn't have to be pushed. He doesn't have to be chased. He doesn't have to be constantly corrected. He becomes his own master. And that's where true freedom lies, being able to govern yourself. Here's the irony. Discipline is hard for a moment, but regret is hard for a lifetime. Missing a workout stings for a day, but missing your health stings for years. Spending foolishly feels good for an hour, but being broke feels terrible for decades. Discipline asks for a little pain now, so you can enjoy a lot of joy later. Lack of discipline gives you a little pleasure now, but a mountain of pain later. And the man who understands that chooses discipline every time. Discipline builds confidence. When you know you can trust yourself to follow through, you walk differently, you speak differently, you live differently. You don't just hope things will work out. You know you'll make them work out because you've proven it to yourself through action. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen that confidence. And confidence, more than almost anything else, is freedom. The great thing about discipline is it's not about giant acts. It's about the small, consistent ones. Reading 10 pages a day, saving a little every week, saying no to the wrong thing once, waking up on time. Those don't look like much in the moment, but string them together for a year, 2 years, 5 years, and you won't even recognize your life. That's the compound effect of discipline. So don't make the mistake of thinking discipline takes away your joy. Discipline is what makes joy possible. It's what keeps you free from regret, free from guilt, free from the pain of wasted time and wasted opportunities. Discipline doesn't confine you, it sets you free. And the man who learns to live by it discovers a life far bigger, far stronger, far freer than the one who never does. Character isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. And the building blocks of character are the choices you make every single day. Every time you take responsibility, every time you own up, every time you step forward instead of stepping back, you're shaping who you are. That's how character is formed, not in a single moment, but in hundreds of small ones where you decide, this is on me. Responsibility is the weight that strengthens the muscles of character. Just like lifting weights in the gym, it isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes you'd rather not pick it up. Sometimes you want to skip it altogether. But every time you lift, you grow stronger. Responsibility works the same way. Every time you accept it, you grow. And the more you grow, the more others can lean on you, the more trust you earn, the more respect you command. A man without responsibility may live easier for a while, but he doesn't live stronger. He doesn't live respected. He doesn't live admired. People look at him and see a man who runs, who avoids, who hides. But a man who accepts responsibility, even when it's tough, he earns something money can't buy. He earns character, and character, once built, follows you everywhere. Into your work, into your family, into your community. Think about the man who makes a mistake and says, "It wasn't me, it was them." What happens? For a moment, he might get away with it, but everyone around him knows. They know he's the kind of man who hides when it gets hard. And slowly, trust erodes. People stop depending on him, stop listening to him, stop believing in him. Not because of the mistake, but because of the refusal to take responsibility. On the other hand, think of the man who makes a mistake and says, "That was my fault. I'll do better." Immediately, his stock goes up. People lean in. They respect that honesty. They know he's accountable. They know he's real. That's character at work. Responsibility doesn't just build your reputation. It builds your inner strength. Because when you accept responsibility, you give yourself permission to learn. You give yourself permission to grow. You say, "This is mine, so I can fix it." And every time you do, you get a little wiser, a little tougher, a little more resilient. That's how men of substance are made. Not by avoiding storms, but by standing in them and saying, "I'll take care of it." There's a story I remember about a man who inherited his father's small business. When things started going downhill, he blamed everything: the economy, the workers, the customers. But nothing improved. One day, he looked in the mirror and said, "Maybe the problem is me." That moment changed his life. He stopped pointing fingers and started learning, improving leading. Within a few years, the business was thriving again. What changed? Not the economy, not the workers. He changed, and responsibility shaped him into the kind of man who could lead. Here's the thing about responsibility: it's not glamorous. It doesn't always get applause. Sometimes it feels lonely, but it's in those quiet moments, when no one's watching, that character is forged. When you choose to do the right thing instead of the easy thing. When you decide to stand up instead of sit down. When you carry the weight even though you could drop it. That's when character is built. And character, once built, is what makes a man unshakable. Responsibility is also the test of trust. People don't trust you because you talk well. They don't trust you because you promise big. They trust you because they've seen you take responsibility. They've watched you handle the tough stuff without running away. That's what convinces people that you're solid. And when people trust you, doors open. Opportunities come. Relationships deepen. Because everyone wants to walk beside a man they can count on. And remember, responsibility isn't just about the big things. It's about the little ones. Showing up on time, keeping your word, finishing what you start, returning what you borrowed, saying, "I was wrong when you were wrong." Those small choices stack up. And over time, they form a pattern. That pattern becomes your character, and your character becomes your destiny. So when life hands you responsibility, don't look at it as a burden. Look at it as a chance to become more. Because every responsibility you accept adds another layer to who you are. It chisels away the weakness. It polishes the rough edges. It reveals the strength inside. And one day you look back and realize that all those moments, all those choices, all those responsibilities, they didn't just shape your circumstances. They shaped you. They made you into the kind of man others admire, the kind of man others trust, the kind of man who can stand tall in any storm. Every man leaves something behind. Some leave money, some leave buildings, some leave memories. But the most valuable thing a man can leave is not in his wallet or in his possessions. It's in his character. And nothing builds that legacy stronger than responsibility. A man who lives responsible leaves behind respect. Respect from his children, his family, his friends, his community. That's a legacy no one can steal. No economy can shrink. No circumstance can erase. When people remember you, they don't just remember what you had. They remember who you were. They remember if you could be counted on. They remember if your word meant something. They remember if you carried your weight or if you left it for someone else. And that memory becomes your legacy. Think about a father. A father who takes responsibility doesn't just provide food and shelter. He provides stability. He provides guidance. He shows by his actions that promises matter, that work matters, that truth matters. His children grow up not just knowing he loved them, but knowing he could be relied on. And one day, when they're faced with challenges of their own, they'll remember his example. They'll stand taller because he stood taller. That's a legacy. Now compare that with the man who avoids responsibility, the one who runs from his duties, who always has an excuse, who leaves others to pick up the pieces. Maybe he had charm, maybe he had talent, maybe he had good intentions. But what people remember is that they couldn't count on him, that when the moment came to stand, he disappeared. That becomes his legacy too. And that's the kind of memory no man should want. Responsibility is not just about today, it's about tomorrow. The choices you make, the duties you accept, the burdens you carry, they echo. They echo in the lives of your children, in the stories told about you, in the reputation you leave behind. A man who takes responsibility doesn't just build his own life, he builds a foundation for generations. His discipline becomes their model. His sacrifices become their strength. His integrity becomes their inheritance. I remember a story about a grandfather who worked a simple job all his life. He never made headlines, never built an empire, never had his name on a building. But he showed up every day. He kept his promises. He provided for his family. He taught his children to work, to save, to tell the truth. Years later, when his grandchildren talked about him, they didn't mention what he owned. They said, he was a man we could trust. That was his legacy, and it was worth more than gold. See, wealth fades, titles fade, fame fades, but the legacy of responsibility grows stronger with time. Every generation that benefits from it adds to its value. It's like planting a tree. At first, it's just a small thing. But over the years, it grows tall, it provides shade, it produces fruit. And long after the man who planted it is gone, others are still blessed by it. Responsibility is the seed that grows into that tree. A man's legacy isn't measured only by what he accomplished for himself, but by what he left for others. Did he leave wisdom? Did he leave strength? Did he leave an example worth following? That's what responsibility gives you the chance to leave behind. Not just achievements, but impact. Not just possessions, but principles. Not just memories, but direction. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need wealth or status to build that kind of legacy. You just need responsibility. The responsibility to keep your word. The responsibility to do your work well. the responsibility to care for your family, the responsibility to stand firm in hard times. Any man can live that way, and every man who does leaves behind something priceless. Because when the story of your life is told, people may not remember the size of your house or the car you drove or the clothes you wore. But they will remember if you showed up. They will remember if you carried your load. They will remember if you lived with responsibility. And that memory, that respect, that example, that's the legacy of a responsible man. So, what does it all come down to? It comes down to this. Life doesn't reward excuses, it rewards responsibility. Every step we take, every choice we make, either moves us closer to becoming the man we're meant to be or drifts us further away. Responsibility is the bridge. Responsibility is the compass. Responsibility is the difference between a man who merely survives and a man who truly lives. We said a real man takes full responsibility. Why? Because that's how he earns his dignity. That's how he wins respect. That's how he builds strength. You can't blame the world and expect to grow. You can't hide from duty and expect to stand tall. You can't shrug off the weight and expect to get stronger. It just doesn't work that way. And remember, responsibility isn't a punishment, it's a privilege. It's life handing you the tools to shape your own future. It's life saying, here, build something with this. Build your character. Build your family. Build your legacy. And if you accept that invitation, you don't just live better, you become better. You've heard me say it before. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. Responsibility is what makes you better. It takes a boy and makes him a man. It takes weakness and turns it into strength. It takes ordinary days and fills them with purpose. And if you stay with it long enough, it takes a single lifetime and turns it into a legacy. One day, someone's going to tell your story. They'll talk about what you stood for, how you lived, what kind of man you were. And when that day comes, I hope the story they tell is of a man who didn't run, who didn't hide, who didn't shift the blame, but a man who took full responsibility. Because that's the kind of story that inspires. That's the kind of story that lasts. That's the kind of story worth living.